For those of you joining, welcome. I'm Zach Wahl. I am the founder, co-founder, and CEO of Enterprise Knowledge. And what we're doing over the next hour, hour and a half here is basically little drop-ins from a bunch of the speakers, both my colleagues and my beloved clients who are speaking with my colleagues over the next couple of days at KMWorld, Taxonomy Bootcamp, SharePoint, whatever it is, Enterprise, whatever it is, all the associated events. So the goal is to have this be pretty interactive. I'm going to ask a couple of questions of the assorted speakers, and then we're going to talk a little bit. We were just talking about beekeeping and glass blowing, so if it goes in that direction, cool. If we want to keep it a little bit closer to the knowledge management realm, we can do that too. There's a chat window. So as y'all joined, if you want to ask questions of me or the speakers or just kind of get involved, please do. The whole idea here is, as much as we've made do over the last couple of years, I always miss that first night at KMWorld where they're serving the bad wine and everybody's going booth to booth. I feel like I'm greeting old friends. I'm seeing clients, I'm seeing former co-workers and colleagues. I'm seeing folks that I wish I could work with and software vendors that I appreciate, all these cool people every year. And we haven't been able to do that. So this is our goal of sort of approximating that in a way that can get everybody feeling a little bit more like the before times. With me, Adam, you want to introduce yourself as my co-host, and then we'll turn things over to our first guests.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you, Zach. That was a great introduction. And just so you know, my name's Adam Eltarhoni, and I wear many hats here at EK. And for tonight's event, I am also running the production, the chat, and co-hosting here with Zach to learn about all the great things that our colleagues and our clients have to say about not just knowledge management, not just KMWorld, but, you know, how things are going in general. So we are excited to have you join us on the YouTube live stream as well, and we'll just kick right into it.
Awesome. So first guest, someone that I've known for about 20 years, Tatiana?
Probably, yes.
So Tatiana and I sat on the board of the Knowledge Management Institute, and then Tatiana came and joined me at my previous company, and then several years back came and joined EK and is now one of the senior leaders on the team. And Laurie Gray, wonderful, one of those beloved clients that I mentioned, with whom I've been working for years now. So Laurie, why don't you introduce yourself first, and then Tatiana, and then we can have a little chat.
Sure. I am Laurie Gray, Vice President of Customer Experience and Design. I lead the innovation function for RGP, and we are currently doing some really exciting things, leveraging our taxonomy, which is where we met the great folks at Enterprise Knowledge, and then also mashing that up with some pretty cool knowledge management stuff going on. So we look forward to sharing a sneak of the cool stuff we've got cooking.
Awesome. Thanks, Laurie. And Tatiana.
Excellent. Thank you, Zach. Yes, my name is Tatiana Cakici, and I'm a senior knowledge management consultant at Enterprise Knowledge. I work a lot on designing knowledge management strategies for clients, implementing them, and I focus a lot on taxonomy design, which is one of my passions. So I'm happy to be here. I've been working with Laurie on this project for a while, and we're happy to be here to share this information with you all.
Now, I'm trying to remember, Tatiana, were you the taxonomist or the lead for the first project we did with our GP, or did the two of you come together more recently?
So for both the solutions taxonomy and the skills taxonomy, both of those efforts.
Right.
Good. Right. Awesome. So you are speaking with at Taxonomy Bootcamp. When is the talk?
That's going to be this coming Wednesday around noon.
Yeah. Perfect. Excellent. So why don't you both tell us a little bit about kind of what the gist of the talk is? First of all, I mean, it's a case study, and I think that's so powerful, right? I feel like too many talks still are sort of these like big, broad concepts and ideas, and it doesn't get enough to like the practical applications of knowledge management and what you can really do with this stuff. So I love the fact that it's a case study. Laurie, you want to lead off with a little bit of what our listeners might get to hear from y'all on Wednesday?
Sure. So we're going to talk about work that we're doing currently, creating 360-degree employee views. And all of this was really made possible because of the journey that we began back in 2018, literally when we met you guys, 3 years ago, and began working with you on the initial version of the taxonomy, which has then evolved over time and is enabling us as an organization, as our taxonomy matures, it's enabling us as an organization to just be able to do more and more. And one of the tough things for us that Tatiana helped us on the phase 2 round of work is aligning supply and demand. So RGP is a professional services organization. We have clients who have particular needs and opportunities. We have consultants who, in varying levels of appropriateness, could serve in the roles and meet the client's needs. It's difficult, though. It's a highly manual process today. And Zach, I'm sure, being in professional services yourself, you understand that this can be difficult for any size organization. But when you look at an organization the size of RGP, which is 4,000 or so employees, obviously the sense of scale becomes pretty challenging. And so we'll be talking about what we call virtual polished human, which was actually the winning idea of a design thinking competition that we sponsored. One of my KPIs is to teach the organization about design thinking. And so we sponsored this competition as a way to begin to teach the organization. And this is the winning idea that really has come to evolve. It's evolved after the competition, not just to include the educational components, which were the original concepts in the winning design thinking result, but also applying taxonomy, supply demand consideration, artificial intelligence, et cetera. So, being able to kick ideas around with Tatiana and say, okay, help me understand, recommendation engines and where we're going with knowledge graphs and how do we need to leverage the ontologies that we have in place so that we'll be successful. I think having that understanding has really allowed us to begin to take what we're talking about doing internally and really begin to move it forward with something that's going to provide a lot of value.
That's so exciting. And, at a very basic level, Laurie, I think of this almost like a dating service.
It is.
But the way that you've broken this down is incredibly exciting. There was a lot that has gone into this. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what was the hardest part of just getting started with this? I mean, it's so complex, it's so difficult, and there must have been so many impediments to getting the right people to understand what this could do for the organization. What were some of those early challenges?
Which circle do we want to start talking about? Talk about getting people.
I got all night. Go for it.
Or design thinking or virtual polished human or yes, right? No, I mean, I think, in all things in an organization like our GP, where we're very heavily matrixed, we're distributed, we're, global. Obviously, I think the secret to success is the coalition of the willing. Right. And so, with the work that we began on a number of years ago, and we talk about this in the presentation, right? With the work that we began with the taxonomy in 2018, blending into 2019, evolving that into 2020 and 2021, and then working through our own internal digital transformations. And, if I would have tried to start with this 3 years ago, we would have left everybody behind. But I think, it's that incremental, that incremental progress and the iterative design, which is really just part of, agile product design best practices, which was what we live and breathe every day, I think has been key to success in terms of getting people to come along and get excited and understand the possibilities. I think that's probably another challenge that we had, right? If I were to start with all of this, they would think it was like science fiction, right? But because of the journey that we've traveled, getting people more comfortable with concepts, we actually now have, and you all will probably laugh at this, everybody at RGP calls everything a taxonomy now. They know that word, and they use it, they overextend it. But that's okay. I'm okay with that, right? And so I'll hear taxonomy instead of navigation as we're working on our KM redesign. I'll hear taxonomy and appropriately used for sure.
Yeah.
But it really just has to do with, a collection of words is now suddenly a taxonomy, period, end of discussion. So I view that as a tremendous accomplishment.
Totally.
Yeah.
I've got to interject because a former client that will not be named used to do that with design thinking. Anytime we presented any sort of challenge or issue, said, well, that's fine. We'll just design thinking that. I'd be like, I don't think that's how design thinking works.
When you have a hammer, everything.
Yeah.
Laurie, it's fine. Don't worry about it. We're just going to design thinking that, and it'll be okay.
But at least they learned what it is, right? Yeah.
No, they didn't. That's exactly the point.
Oh no. Yeah, no. It turns into a series of teachable moments, right? Where you say, okay, help me understand when you use this word, what do you actually mean here? And we had one group on the knowledge management redesign work that we're doing internally finally figured out, and it took quite a bit of conversation to get to this point. What they were talking about was their navigational structure, and really they were talking about their information architecture, but as manifested by the navigational structure. It was like, okay, guys, we're there now. So yeah, I look at it as progress. Some days we say, well, it's a little bit different than what we're thinking, but the fact that they know the words and they're using it and they're leaning in, I view that as tremendous.
Jokes aside, I think that's amazing. And obviously, that has a lot to do with how you've been able to sell it and convince them. Now, I don't want to spoil too much for Wednesday, but where is the project now? Like, what can folks do that they couldn't previously do, or what's coming?
So with the virtual polished human work, it really is in proof of concept, and it stemmed off of work that we had partnered with Vanderbilt University. So we had created an internal product called RGP Pulse at the proof of concept level as part of the innovation group that I lead. And it really was meant to be an employee pulse survey, but powered by artificial intelligence that was developed in partnership with Vanderbilt University. And that was really RGP's first foray into understanding machine learning and the power of it and what it can do for that, what it could do for us organizationally. So when we had the opportunity to re-engage with the virtual polished human team, we were able to just really apply some of those same thoughts that we had built as part of Pulse and say, well, what if we applied it now to people and skills, right? And again, because of the conversation with Tatiana, it was probably a year ago, March, when we were at the last conference together. And I sat down, I said, explain this to me, you guys, help me understand. There's a piece missing. What am I missing here? And it was that knowledge transfer that allowed us to push it forward. So right now, it really is a prototype. It's not even a proof of concept, although we have a separate but similar proof of concept actually that we run for the Pulse product.
So great. So exciting. And I think you've mentioned knowledge graphs several times, and I know that's such a hot topic. It's something we're really excited about. Do you want to explain just briefly, and Tatiana, feel free to jump in here, how taxonomies, which is where we started, connect to knowledge graphs? Like, what is that bridge, and how do those things come together? What does that really mean? And Guy, welcome, by the way. We'll say hi in a moment.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely an important topic. So thank you for mentioning that, Zach. So RGP has worked already on their taxonomies, and they've done a lot of work on that. We've worked together on it. They've also started working on ontologies, making some relationships between skills and job roles and solutions. But there is still a lot more work to do in terms of continuing with that development of ontologies to include additional entities that can represent relationships where other questions can be answered for RGP, not only the supply and demand kind of matching. So where the knowledge graph comes into place is really ensuring that a combination of the ontologies, the taxonomies that are fitting some of those values for those entities, as well as the various data sources can actually help create a knowledge graph that displays the relationships and make all this machine readable, which is the most important thing, right? So that eventually the system can help answer a lot of those different questions in real time and support decision making. So that's where we stand.
So this is, I just think, such a key takeaway that what we're really saying, I mean, knowledge management has had its ebbs and flows over the years, but we're at this point that between the foundational elements of KM and some of the newer technologies, we're talking machine learning, we're talking about artificial intelligence. Like, this is, I feel like I've been waiting for this moment my entire career. Laurie, you're feeling it, right?
I am. And I got just super excited over just the ability to build true content recommendation engines, right? That was where we were looking, and we got involved in the Pulse work, saw how it really could apply to humans and begin to come up with algorithms that would accurately predict those employees at highest risk of leaving, right? And then also to provide the folks who provided management to those consultants with actionable activities to take to attempt to maintain, right, reel them back from the edge. Yeah. So, great. We're going to start with content. We're going to begin to apply it to people. Now we're going to apply it to people even more and really looking at multifactorial inputs that really are going to give us that big picture. So not just, hey, what skills do you have? Or, hey, what kind of work does this client do? And the example that I love to give is we've got some clients who are based out of Houston, Texas, and we have some consultants who do really well in that oil and gas experience, right? They're out in the field and wearing blue jeans and it's fine. They may or may not be comfortable in going to a client in Silicon Valley or in Manhattan. How do I know? What elements can I begin to predict that says this person with these capabilities and this kind of view, we predict will be highly successful as they stand in this new environment? Or, hey, this person has the potential to be highly successful if we can supportively provide them with this information or this training, right? That's where we're going. And so that ability to begin to provide better experiences for our consultants, make it easier for our talent teams and our account teams to be able to service our consultants and our clients. I only think that this is going to drive to higher client satisfaction while also preserving our margin, right? We're going to be able to place consultants more effectively and more efficiently and more successfully.
Not just your client satisfaction, but what you've just described is internal means to better support your growing team. And totally. I don't know about you, but it's really hard to hire great people right now. The job market is weird. And so the idea of RGP spearheading a really unique tool that's going to make it, frankly, easier to retain top talent because you're helping them grow and you're helping them perform, sounds like a pretty significant competitive advantage.
I'd like to believe so. And on Wednesday, we do touch briefly on some of the KPIs. Include things like attrition and satisfaction and margin and time to placement and all of that, right? So there are a lot of hard and fact numbers that we feel that we will be able to trace back to when we get this done properly.
Awesome. I love it. Well, look, we're kind of running through the cycle here. Laurie, Tatiana, stick around, hang out if you want. Otherwise, and by the way, for our listeners, feel free to throw some questions into chat, either for Laurie or Tatiana, or as we move, just kind of keep it running. As these things tend to go, I think we're already like 10 minutes behind. So by the end, we should be 2 hours behind, and that'll be great. We'll have plenty of time for the questions. For now, Guy, welcome.
Hey, Zach.
Hello,
to be
how
here.
are you?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome.
So Guillermo Galdamez, you've been with us, 3 years now?
Running on 4.
Oh my God. Yeah. The last year doesn't count.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
You blink and another year rushes by.
Trust me, with 2 little girls at home, and I know Tatiana can agree with this one. you blink and 10 years go by, I think is the way that it works at this point. Guy, talk to us about what you're doing with the conference.
Yeah, sure. So I'll be on Wednesday evening facilitating one of the community chats. Mm-hmm. And my topic is around being able to articulate the value of KM and being able to get buy-in from your organization, right? So this is actually something that we at EK do all of the time, help our clients get that buy-in and take the next steps in their KM journey, right? I think it really speaks to the success of our approach that we're able to showcase so many different case studies in this year's KMWorld, right? So I'll be facilitating a discussion around that, having a bit of Q&A with the participants, and hopefully, co-creating a lot of recommendations, next steps that people can take home and try them out for themselves.
Yeah, I love this topic. I feel like if we were to go back 5 years, a lot of organizations would be saying, well, yeah, but what's the business value? What's the ROI? And too often the response to that is like, no, it's really good. Trust us. And that's just not acceptable. We have gotten to the point where I think we can really quantify a lot of this. We can express it in terms that are very direct and personal to the organization. And at the end of the day, we can apply some calculators to say this is hard return on investment. This is measurable. Like, Laurie, going back to you, what was that first measure from the first effort? It was in the millions, right? Laurie's on mute. So I think she said $1 million. I believe that was.
1 million.
Yeah, that one.
No, I mean, I think with the original effort, for the taxonomy effort, we were, that's a great question. I need to go back to our business case on the taxonomy effort. I don't remember what our hard and fast return was on it. But what I can tell you on the knowledge management side, for example, our calculations are, if we save 300 people across the organization, which is less than 10% of the org, 12 minutes per day, we're looking at 15,000 redeployable hours per year. Wow. And it scales up from there, right? And this is really simple math. I mean, 300 times 12 times, and we didn't even take it out of 52 weeks. We took it out of 50 times 50 gives you that many redeployable hours. And so, then you can start turning it back around to the different business units and saying, well, what would you do with 15,000 hours? How many people could you hire?
Yeah.
Right.
That's
new clients could you go acquire?
That's amazing, especially in a services organization. You can directly apply that. That's increased revenue. That's increased productivity. Right. That's increased opportunity for innovation. Like, one of the things that folks at EK keep saying is, I just want time to innovate, to come up with the next cool thing. And even if it doesn't lead to hard ROI, wouldn't it be fun to have a couple more hours in the day to actually think like that?
Right.
So Guy, I think Laurie just gave you a couple metrics for your conversation, but why this topic? I mean, trust me, I'm a believer. I think everybody here is, but why'd you pick this? Why did you want to talk about the business value side of things?
Well, every year when KMWorld rolls around, I submit a proposal for a talk, I'm always thinking about what are our clients asking about, right? What knowledge do I have that I can share with others that that would actually improve the overall practice, the overall field of knowledge management, right? So being able to get buy-in from KM, like I said earlier, is one of the first questions that we get whenever we are engaging in a knowledge management strategy project, right? Where we do all this work. Where do we go from here? What is our bigger picture? How do I get people on board with this great idea and this great initiative that I have in my mind? So that's where the inspiration came from.
I love it. So how do the community chats work? Do people have to sign up for this in advance, or is it just like everybody's going to show up in your group and that's that? Like this is, I think, new this year.
so there have been versions of community chats in the past. For me, this is going to be my first time doing it virtually, which is exciting. But yeah, I there isn't a sign up per se, right? Any of the attendees at the conference can basically drop in. So I have no clue who is going to be there. And that's part of the exciting part of this session, right? It's
nice.
You know, I will not be talking for an hour and a half straight, right? We're going to be engaging in discussion and generally co-creating this session with the people who are going to be there. So I have no idea which direction it's going to go, but I'm hoping that, you know, we'll produce something out of that has value that people can, like I said, can take and apply to their own organizations, but also create like meaningful connections, right? There's so many people who are new to the knowledge management field who attend KMWorld. You know, beyond just the knowledge, try and tap them into a wider network of KM practitioners. This is really what I want for, you know, anybody coming to my session to get out of it.
I love that. Now, sorry.
I had a quick question, Guy. Just thinking about this. So you have someone in your chat, and they ask you this: what would you say is your one sentence elevator pitch to their organization, based on like no knowledge? They say they come in this chat and they just like, I want to sell it. What's the fastest way I could sell it? Do you have kind of any advice there?
Well, the first step is really being able to articulate what the value of KM is for your individual organization, right? Mm-hmm. I have to fall back on like that typical consultant answer. It depends, mm-hmm. But really knowledge management is such a broad field that in the end, the value and the use cases for it will vary really widely from one organization to the other. So it can be, hey, how do I prevent knowledge from walking out the door, you know, whenever there's a reorg? Mm-hmm. How do I find the stuff? How do I onboard people faster and get them to be productive? How do I avoid, you know, all these regulatory risks because I don't know where my stuff is? So really like being able to articulate what knowledge management means for your organization in particular and why knowledge management matters in your company, that's where you're successful.
No, that's awesome. I think it sounds like a great it sounds like a great community chat conversation.
So Guy, I will push you on this, and then I want to introduce Bess. Hi, Bess. So I was just having this conversation with somebody. You said lead with the value. What do you want to try to do with KM? I am almost tempted to say, rather than lead with the value, it's lead with what's KM. Like, don't you think there are so many organizations that don't even know what that means? Like, Laurie, this is we're just going to design thinking it. No, we're just going to KM it. Like, what is KM? What does that mean to your organization? Guy?
For us, I'll toss this out there. You know, for us, before we really got involved in talking about it, KM was synonymous with SharePoint, right? It was a very, very tech-centric model, right? Not wrong, totally appropriate given the context, but also not delivering as much business value as it could have.
Right, and that's a small box for KM. It's not a bad box or an incorrect box, but it's a little KM box.
Yeah.
So Guy?
So to add to that, you know, I definitely agree with everything that Laurie said, and everything that was going on in the conversation before I joined. But yeah, sometimes terms get in the way. I feel around knowledge management, and at some point you have to be very pragmatic and be flexible in the way that you describe what knowledge management is. Mm-hmm. Now, at the beginning of every engagement, we work with our clients to really define what knowledge management is for them at their organization, and it can look, you know, in a lot of different ways. It can, you know, begin with a taxonomy. It can begin with a knowledge base. It can begin with knowledge transfer and knowledge continuity focus. So, in the past, I was thinking of work that we did with this European institution where they didn't want us to use the term communities of practice. They were, I think they had been an initiative before where, it didn't gain traction. So we recommended communities of practice, but we basically had to rebrand the communities of practice for them. Yeah. Right? Like the principles are the same. We just didn't call them communities of practice.
Spaces of expertise.
Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes like don't let like the terms and the jargon get in the way. Jargon can be complicated in our field. So really, make it straightforward where people can understand it.
Love it.
And really contextualize it to the organization.
Nice. I also like the fact that you're saying terms can get in the way to somebody who was born as a taxonomist. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. So Guy, when is, remind our viewers, when is your thing?
Wednesday evening. I think it begins at 5, if I'm not mistaken, from 5 to 7:30.
Awesome.
Or 5:30 actually.
Okay, got it.
5:30, sorry.
So we'll turn to Bess Schrader. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So Bess, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what your topic is?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a senior consultant at Enterprise Knowledge. Been with EK for about 2.5 years. Not quite as long as most of the other people on the call, but working my way there. And for most of the time I've been at EK, I've been lucky enough to work with the Jet Propulsion Lab, which is a NASA federally funded research and development center. So I'm going to be co-presenting with 2 of the people I've worked with there on an exciting project called the Institutional Knowledge Graph, which is JPL's attempt to create a knowledge graph of institutional knowledge, as the name would imply.
So you know what I have to do. I have to say it. So like what you're saying is that knowledge graph technology actually is rocket science. Is that?
I think there's a few rocket scientists at JPL who would beg to differ, but we're helping them be more efficient. So
I think my favorite, when we first kicked off this project, we were doing some training with JPL and I didn't get to go because I'm not smart or cool enough, but you actually got to see the Mars rover, right?
Being built, yeah, being assembled. Very cool.
Wow. So for those of you out there who are like, should I get into consulting? Yeah, because you get to do all these completely random, incredibly cool things. We have this tradition of the EK hat, and I think there was a negotiation as to whether we could put the EK hat on the Mars rover, and we were told, no.
Absolutely not.
Not so much.
Hard no.
So very cool. Again, I mean, this is similar to Laurie and Tatiana talking. First of all, it's amazing that your client wants to co-present with you. That's so cool. What's the thesis statement of the talk? Like, what will folks learn from attending the conversation?
Yeah, so our main goal is to kind of explain how we did what we did and then provide some lessons learned for other organizations that are trying to get started down the semantic technology path, in particular with ontologies and knowledge graphs. It's, JPL had been working in semantic technologies for a while with taxonomies and had some pretty mature taxonomies, but the ontology and knowledge graph space was new to JPL as a whole. So trying to kind of branch into how do we get started with this? How do we get buy-in? Some of the things that we were talking about right before I joined. How do you kind of get an initiative like this off the ground?
So I would imagine JPL probably has a little data kicking around.
A bit.
a wee slice. There's got to be some, I guess, what I would call dirty data or conflicting data in there. Has one of the challenges been, how do you actually get the right stuff aligned with the right stuff? How do you clean it up? That's got to be a mighty challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're really looking at institutional knowledge. So not actually the rocket science knowledge. We're looking at more the things that every institution or enterprise has. So things like people and organizations, projects, not so much getting into the nitty gritty of earth science. Although there are groups that are working on ontologies and earth science at JPL, and that's very exciting, just not what we're doing. So when you're doing things like that, as every organization probably has this situation, you have that information split across all sorts of different repositories. And a lot of times you have conflicting information in different repositories. So even if you have an identified gold source for information about people, maybe you have another gold source for information about buildings. And one of those sources says that Zach works in this building and one of them says Zach works in another. Or in the case of JPL, sometimes you have systems that don't realize a certain building exists or still have information about a building that was demolished 15 years ago. So when you're trying to combine all of this data from multiple gold sources, how do you figure out, which gold source is the best? That can be really messy. And that's something that we really struggled with when we were getting off the ground. And what we ultimately found is that there's actually a lot of value in including all of the dirty data and just tracking the provenance of where it came from. That was something we never set out to do, data cleanup and be a source for kind of finding those discrepancies, but it's actually been a really powerful tool. A lot of times we can go back to data owners and say, hey, just FYI, this other system says that building doesn't exist. You guys, I don't know if you want to update your data or they need to update theirs, but it's allowing us to uncover these discrepancies that otherwise no one would ever find.
That's such a cool secondary use case, right? Like that's not the mission of the project, or at least it wasn't. And frankly, it's kind of counterintuitive to say that you should keep all this stuff that you probably know is wrong, but that's awesome. How did you get to that? Because there must have been some meetings where you're like, oh my God, how are we going to fix this? Or this is a problem, but it's actually, there's value to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually, one of our earliest meetings, we were trying to figure this out, particularly with usernames. We would find very infrequently someone had two different usernames in two different systems, which if that's your unique identifier for an individual or your organization is a big problem. So we went to someone who works in the kind of help desk department, I guess you could think of it at JPL. And we're trying to figure out, which source should we preference, which should be the authoritative source. And she actually opened our eyes to the fact, she said, often we'll get complaints from users who want to know why their username is showing up in some downstream system as, an older version. It's actually a huge benefit to have this information and keep it all and figure out, where is the issue. It actually helps us track things down. So it was definitely opened our eyes to that benefit as well.
Shocking. So it's actually beneficial to listen to your users and get their guidance. I dig it. I'll take it.
Yes. So one of the effects of this, though, is that we have to train our users on how to evaluate the data and kind of walk them through, here's all of the information we have about this data and where it came from, its lineage, and we can help you sort through how to preference certain sources or just display the sources of this information so that, you can decide for yourself which information you want to keep and which information you don't.
Bess, I love that. So it actually gets us a little full circle here, because there's actually, even though this is a highly technical initiative and it's very data intensive, there's still that communications element. There's still that education and frankly, the partnership element to getting the right people to understand how to use this and what the value of it is. Can you tell us a little bit more? And by the way, I don't want to spoil the talk, but is that going to be part of what you share in the forthcoming days?
Yes, absolutely. So a big piece of the success of this initiative at JPL has been our action team and advisory committee. And both of those groups will talk about what they are and how we develop those in our talk. But having this kind of cross-disciplinary, reach at JPL and getting input from people across the organization has been really crucial to solving some of these issues and getting buy-in.
Very cool. Again, I'll remind our audience, feel free to ask any questions. This has been very cool, and I love hearing this, but I also know some of this in advance. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to chime in. Bess, thank you for that. And feel free to stick around. Also feel free to make the way of D and fly into the wind. I know that it's getting late. Todd, we'll turn to you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Tatiana.
Guys.
Todd, you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you're speaking about at KMWorld?
Yes, happy to do so. So yeah, good evening, everyone. So my name is Todd Falberg. I am a senior consultant at EK. Been here for around 3.5 years. It's been an awesome time. And with that time, I spend my time focusing on both sides of our house when it comes to strategy work. I'm there for engagements to ensure that when we work with clients that we're essentially understanding the business value and the technical value of their work. And I'm also on the other side of the house where I'm focusing on ensuring that our technical strategy is implemented correctly. And that is what leads to this conversation that I'll be having this Thursday at 2:45 p.m. And the KMWorld Track C is that we are talking about the essentially within the knowledge and the flow learning and content management. I'm speaking with Amber Simpson from Wal-Mart, and we are speaking about essentially improving the digital experience for their learning and development team, and explaining in detail how we went from a strategy engagement and how we work to implement that to support their learning organization, which provides learning content for over 1.4 million store associates.
Yeah, that sounds like the appropriate talk for the end of the day at the last day of the conference. That's so.
Right. Hope everyone's prepared.
Yeah.
No, this is awesome. So Walmart, one of the largest employers in the world, one of the biggest company in the world. Is that right?
The largest private employer. They have 2.4 million associates across the world, and about 1.4, 1.6 are in the United States.
So yeah, that's pretty big. And what we're basically talking about is ensuring that the tool can do something that no sea of humans could do, which is ensure that each one of those individuals gets the right learning for them. So Walmart, as I understand it, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, has all this great material, right? Has invested heavily in training and learning and development and the learning performance ecosystem and all these great things, but there's no way to lead the horse to water, so to speak. I mean, you've got to have individuals guiding those folks and saying, no, you should take this class, or you should watch this video, or you need to do this thing. That gets incredibly complex. So the idea here is that we're basically using some semantic technologies to construct curriculum. Do I have it right?
Yes, that is correct. And that is correct at a very high level, because as you would imagine with an organization that has that many folks, is that also there is just a lot of content, a lot of different technologies. I see Joe is joining us. Welcome, Joe.
Joining it.
Yes. So have a glass. So, and you're right. That's where just within the this ecosystem, we are essentially addressing problems that a sheer amount of people cannot address. This is where technology is part of KM. This is where technology is going to be enabling Walmart to continue to scale its development of learning content, which ultimately then trickles down to then provide better content, better material to those that need the training within the stores and across the country. Because this training stems from everything from, what does an employee do their first day at work, or what does an associate do their first day at work, to a new law or guideline has come out from the government, and they need to know how do they stay in compliance with that in order to not get in trouble. So there's definitely a lot riding on their content, and that's where every piece of content matters, and which also means every amount of time they spend to find it matters. And if you start multiplying that by 1.4 million people, that's where any type of inefficiency is very noticeable at the end of the day on a balance sheet.
Yeah. So for those of you following along, this really tracks with what Laurie said. If you can shave a few minutes off of 1 million employees' time, you've just saved billions of dollars. Like it's that simple. Now, it's not that simple, because it's not like you can add all those minutes together and release that amount of funds or that many people. But that is time that you open up for productivity, for learning, for improved performance, for opportunities to innovate and just better serve the organization. And in a case like Wal-Mart, that's actually time that folks can be on the sales floor, where they can be supporting customers, where they can be helping somebody select the right product that's going to make them happy. So it also yields improved revenues and improved client, or in this case, customer satisfaction. It doesn't get much better than that. That is quantifiably great. So Todd, what part of the presentation are you most excited about? Hey, Sara.
Hello.
Hey, Sara. Yeah, so what am I most excited about? This is something that Amber and I, my co-presenter, actually coined last week, which is it's kind of a steal from something that you all might have heard before, but it is taxonomies and ontologies and metadata, oh my. So something that we're really excited about talking about is breaking down the complexities of what we've discovered and how complex the solution can be if you're new to KM or new to taxonomies and ontologies, and breaking it down to be as Sesame Street simple as possible. That's been a term that we have been using a lot on the project. It was actually something that we first learned from Walmart when we very first met them. The very first meeting, one of the first things they led with was, we're successful by keeping things Sesame Street simple. And that's where we're excited for this presentation of essentially sticking true to that and diving into these technologies and these solutions that at times can make you nervous or make individuals nervous to diving into it, but explaining that they're not scary. If anything, they can make your life and your day a lot easier, but they also can make your colleagues and for example, those that you're producing learning content for can make their lives and their careers more successful as well.
Yeah, I love it. So, two things on Sesame Street simple. The first is, I think that that's such an important lesson within the KM world, because there are way too many times where we live it all day and we want to talk about taxonomies and ontologies and knowledge graphs and, oh boy, content types and search hit types. And we can go all day with this. And it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to the business or the business outcomes or the return on investment. So it's great to hear that. Secondly, for anybody that's actually a fan of Sesame Street, I have a 2-year-old at home at this point, and there's this old Kermit the Frog song called Doo-Wop Hop, and I just deeply recommend it. Everybody just go find it on YouTube. It's a beat. It's a real thing, and it is highly compelling.
We're gonna get addicted to it.
It's not just about getting addicted to it. You're just gonna. It's your whole life. You're just gonna. That's gonna be your jam from that point forward. Awesome. So Todd, feel free to stick around, but really excited to hear the talk again. When is it?
It is this Thursday at 2:45. We are part of KMWorld Track C.
Track C. So
we're seeing you all there.
Anchoring the event with Wal-Mart, if you will.
Gotta love that.
So with me in the studio, also known as EK headquarters, is Joe Hilger, co-founder and COO.
At times.
And we also had Sara Nash join us. Sara?
Hello, everyone. How's it going?
So welcome. Do you both want to introduce yourself real briefly? Joe, go ahead.
Well, Joe Hilger, co-founder and COO of Enterprise Knowledge.
Good, great.
Just to repeat what you said. But also somebody who spends a lot of history doing content management first, then enterprise search, and then moved into the knowledge graph world. And have really enjoyed seeing EK take off, particularly in the knowledge graph space as we're doing more and more work there. Sara, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience, particularly in that front?
Sure thing. So nice to be here with everyone. My name is Sara Nash. I'm a technical consultant in our data and information management practice. And I've been with the EK for over 3 years now, and have my experience at EK is centered around designing and building knowledge graph products in their kind of early design and proof of concept stages to more kind of industrial and production data pipelines that are using graph technology specifically.
So if you're not catching the theme here, we've had, I think, 4 or 5 people mention knowledge graphs at this point. And I feel like last year that we were live at KMWorld, which was actually 2 years ago, people were kind of saying, what's a knowledge graph and what's this thing? And now it just seems pervasive. Joe, Sara, what's happened here? What's going on in the world of knowledge graphs?
Sara, you want to go first and then I'll add?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think there are a few things that have really contributed to the growth and kind of exposure to knowledge graph technologies. I mean, one of the biggest things is that the technologies is kind of caught up to where people have been wanting to build in the space. So the kind of computing power and storage and kind of the building out of graph technologies is something that can now support what are these more kind of intuitive models that people have been, theorizing or conceptualizing for quite a while. So that's one of the biggest things. And I think another kind of big contributor is that people are seeing the value of graph technologies in the way that they operate in their daily lives. When you're doing a Google search, or when you're, searching for something on Amazon, or, when you have a chat bot that makes it so you don't have to, stand in line at American Airlines, that this artificial intelligence can kind of help you and recognize those kinds of patterns. And so the more that people are seeing that in their lives, and I think that then the enterprise wants to see, how can we take advantage of that type of technology? And oftentimes it has the kind of that graph background, or that, focus on semantics or the way that people model things.
Some rough travel recently, Sara? Anything we need to
You're sensing that? I mean, sorry. I hope this bleeps out American Airlines.
Yeah, bleep it out. Joe, anything to add?
Yeah, 2 things.
Have you also had bad travel on American Airlines?
No, I haven't. I haven't traveled much, so that has saved me that problem. The 2 other things I would add here is we've forever wanted to combine content and data. And now all of a sudden we can. Knowledge graphs pull that information together seamlessly. And it's really fun to me. I go to these data conferences and they're talking about knowledge graphs to solve their data problems. And I go to the classic KM and content conferences. It's the same thing. It's incredible that 2 what used to be very different organizational constructs, et cetera, this data world and the content world can now cross.
So, and Sara, you alluded to this a little bit, but this is not a new concept. I remember back in the 90s, there was this software company called Symagix, and you've always got to be a little cautious when somebody puts the word magic in the name of a software company. Probably means there was not
well thought out.
But that was the concept, right? 25 years ago, the idea was you've got your data, you've got your content, and these things need to talk to each other or the enterprise isn't operating. What's changed?
Well, kind of 2 things to this, and it actually leads to one of the other advantages of knowledge graphs. Think of the knowledge graph almost as a map. So it's not ingesting this information, it's leaving it where it is, but it's pointing to it. So if I've got a report on about a specific product, and then I've got data relevant to that product, the graph will say, here's the product. I'll point to the report, and this is where it exists, and I'll point to the data set and where I get it. And when it pulls it together dynamically, all of a sudden it's there. So instead of trying to force a merger of things that are just not alike, it's mapping and pointing to them. And that means they sit where they are, they get what they want. But when it's time to pull it together, the map does it for you.
So this is pretty consistent, right? There have been all of these big conversations about mass migration of content and the massive data lake and all these other things. We'll just move everything together, and failed. So part of what you're talking about is that you don't have to move your stuff. As long as we can point to it and understand it, it stays where it lays. So
Context and mapping over moving.
Got it. Nash, you have another talk coming up, right?
I do, and I'm joined here by my co-presenter, Polly Alexander, too.
Hello, Polly.
Hey, Polly.
Hello.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So, Polly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm Polly Alexander. I'm day number 6 at a brand new company that I've just joined called WebMD, where I'm the director of metadata and taxonomy. I had the pleasure of getting to know EK though at my previous organization, HealthStream, which is, some of the things we'll be talking about are based on use cases that came out of our relationship together. So I've been in this field for about 15 years, started as a clinical librarian, and have landed in this really cool space where we get to build recommender engines and knowledge graphs and things like that. So
that's fantastic. Director of Metadata and Taxonomy, I think, is the title that pretty much anybody watching this wishes they had. So, so Sarah, Polly, you want to talk a little bit about what you're going to be sharing and what the attendees would potentially get out of it? Or
Sarah,
not?
do you want me to? It's totally cool. Sarah and I did not plan this out very. I'll start, and then Sarah can fill in holes that I leave. So we are going to, as I mentioned, sort of talk about some different use cases that we sort of started with to be able to build out. Basically, we wanted to talk through sort of step by step how we built out some semantic recommenders in order to sort of help support these different use cases that we're going to be talking about in more detail tomorrow, specifically around healthcare professional development and sort of supporting the lifelong learning of a healthcare professional in the healthcare space. Sarah, what did I miss?
Yeah, no, I think that captures it really well. And kind of what we're going to be talking about with the context of those use cases in mind is what is the kind of methodology from taking something from a use case to a clickable product in the form of a semantic recommender. So there are like some key like steps and kind of considerations in that kind of implementation process. And we'll sprinkle in our kind of lessons learned and key takeaways throughout the way. Yeah, just little breadcrumbs along the way.
So, you mentioned something really critical, and Joe, I'm reminded of, you were describing kind of a knowledge graph at some point. Somebody said, well, yeah, if you have like 5 years. But Sarah, you just mentioned prototyping and being able to move quickly and demonstrate value. Is this part of what we're going to hear, the idea that this can be done incrementally and you can actually put something out there for people to touch and interact with in a pretty short period of time?
Absolutely. Yeah. And each of these kind of every product that we've worked on in this semantic recommender space, I think actually the initial prototype came to being in just over a month. So it was like very quickly kind of at less than 2 months time frame of putting together an initial proof of concept, and to get kind of that minimum viable product or something that has a limited kind of set of data or that limited use case, but can be built completely end to end. That's something that we can do in a matter of months. And what I think is really valuable about that is we have a lot of kind of lessons learned throughout the way when we understand more about the data and understand more about what the prioritized use cases would be for expansion. So having that kind of time frame allows us to reprioritize, do it in a more kind of agile way, and prioritizing based on what would be the most valuable thing as we learn more and kind of as we're getting our hands dirty.
Nice. I love it. So, Polly, you obviously now have 2 companies sort of bridging the gap where semantic recommender products or engines is a major part of your role. How do you sell this to a business stakeholder who's like, a what and a who and what's metadata in the first place? Like, how do you talk about this stuff to a layperson?
I try to start by focusing on the use case. What's valuable to them? What's the business outcome that we're trying to get to? And in my 2 different experiences that I've had so far, it's all about being able to get information that was sort of hidden from an end user and getting it to them more quickly, and actually being able to leverage knowledge graphs and leverage the recommender to kind of instill subject matter expertise in order to really make that outcome, impact the end user in a big way. So even though I kind of came from sort of provider and clinician education, and now I'm into the patient education space, I think the principles still apply to both spaces. Kind of grabbing that value out of the data, creating that recommendation algorithm out of it in order to really deliver that value to whoever your end user is, based upon a business case.
That's so cool. What strikes me here is we've had, over the course of the last hour or so, 3 of our different client partners on, RGP and Polly, you with HealthStream, WebMD. But then we've also talked about Wal-Mart, and in each case, it's been this merger of knowledge management and learning. And maybe Sara, Joe, Polly, you'd like to talk about how these worlds fit together, because to me, it's one of the things that gets me most excited is how we can combine the knowledge graph concept with the practical need to get the right people learning the right stuff at the right time. Joe, you want to start off, and then we'll turn to Sara and Polly.
So knowledge graphs, recommendation engines, they determine what you need. The ability to better understand where all your content is, to pull it together, et cetera. Graphs are great at doing that. And think of the challenges you have. Remember at Wal-Mart, Todd, there were tens of thousands of pieces of content that were used to build a course, right?
Yes.
In 7 different systems, right?
Yes.
We're able to build a graph that says, let's put this all together and let's map how they come together. Again, the mapping concept, right? Then the recommendation engine, I could speak to it, but what Polly and Sara have done is really the story there.
Sara, Polly, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can. Yeah,
Not all at once.
I don't want to steal our thunder. Yeah, I mean, I think that's been one of the most exciting parts about the HealthStream use cases and the recommender is that we've built there is that a lot of times when people talk about knowledge management, they're talking about kind of internal content, internal assets, and enabling an internal workforce to kind of better execute what they're doing. Whereas with this HealthStream work and with kind of personalizing user experience and personalizing the learning experience, you really have like access to the user itself. And so I think that's what's pretty exciting about what HealthStream's been doing is leveraging those internal assets and using knowledge management principles, but in a way that's more user facing. And that's something that I think Polly really drove quite effectively at HealthStream is kind of using the principles of knowledge management and to enable learning for end users. And it's the other thing that is what makes kind of this type of like semantic modeling effective for learning is it's really it's something that ties together topics really well, and that's something that's super specific to any organization. And some of the hardest things to model is like knowledge on any particular topic or any domain, and so that's where we get the power of semantic recommendations and why there's such a tie with kind of learning types of use cases.
Really well said. I feel like that aboutness is something that we're always chasing, and have a tool that can actually say, you ask this question, it's about this. It's not written by the same person. It's not from the same department. It's about the same thing. That's the power that we're talking about here. It's knowledge and context. Polly?
And I think just to add to that, I think Sara expressed very well. Expressed the kind of bigger picture very well. But I think just to add to that, I think also what is very exciting about being able to use sort of having that underlying knowledge graph is that you're also able to incorporate your subject matter experts' knowledge as well, which is not something that we could do before at HealthStream. You're able to kind of take that kind of implicit knowledge and really model it into the data, so that you're actually providing a recommendation that is similar to what an educator would provide to that end user. And you're kind of automating that process of that educator having to sift through a bunch of different assets and test questions and courses and all sorts of things. You're sort of bringing that together so that you almost have the brain of the clinical educator built into the system to kind of power those recommendations as well.
Polly, I'm glad you brought that up. I was on a call earlier today, and we were talking about AI, which is really what this is, but the difference between black box AI and explainable AI. And I loved this description. So black box AI is the system reads thousands of pieces of information and starts to make decisions for you. And if anyone asks why or how did you get there, the answer is, well, the system picked it, right? Explainable AI, because we can set rules in place, but complex rules, right? Powerful rules in a graph, we can make smart decisions. And if someone says, well, how did you get to X? We can unwind and say, here's the logic that got us there. And talk about something that is just reinforcing confidence behind what's being done. So graphs not only give you that artificial intelligence, but they do it in a way that's explainable.
This again harkens back to one of our earlier conversations where Bess actually at JPL noted part of what we want to do is actually show all of the data, not just the blessed data or right data, because that allows everybody to understand how we got to the assumptions that we've made and how we can actually trust the completeness, the enterprise knowledge, just to wonderful. Polly, Sara, when are you speaking? Say it again. They don't know.
We are live tomorrow, November 16th at approximately 3:45 p.m.
Sounds great.
A205.
Fantastic. Good. And Joe, you're on what? You've got 2 talks?
I now have 3. Yes.
Cool.
So for those that were asking, EK has another talk. So my first talk tomorrow is implementing search in the new world of AI and machine learning. That's ESD 205, and that's at 3:45 to 4:45. And then on Wednesday, the 17th, Sara and I are doing enriching knowledge graphs, a two-way street. And that is from 12:30 to 1:45.
Who came up with that title?
Well, certainly it wasn't me.
I don't think that's what we submitted.
That's right. It isn't.
I was having trouble finding it on the program.
A two-way street. That just feels like, yes, let's do that.
And then on Thursday, I was asked to join a panel where it's from the Search and Discovery Conference to talk about beyond the buzzwords. And that is Thursday from 2:30 to 3:30. So here are a bunch of search nerds talk about search buzzwords.
Can you sell that talk without using any buzzwords?
Not a chance.
Sara Mae, welcome.
Hello there. Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming in. So Polly, Nash, feel free to stick around and heckle Sara Mae. Otherwise, looking forward to the talk, and we'll take it from there. Joe, you going to hang out?
I'm going to hang out for a little
one?
bit more.
Nice. Good.
Absolutely.
So Sara Mae, welcome. You
you.
are probably the most relaxed of our speakers because you're done speaking already, right?
That's true. It's over with. And I think it went well. It was a good time.
I would say it was, whoever your co-presenter was genius, I would say.
Absolutely.
Okay, I now know who the co-presenter was.
Yeah.
It might have been Zach, right?
Yes, you you spoke last Friday, which I think I'm trying to remember this. I feel like this is the first year that they ever stretched into 2 weeks. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
why.
across a weekend was, well, I guess because it was remote, they could do that.
No, I guess it's.
But let me cut in. Sara Mae, so you carried the talk on Friday, right? Let's be honest.
Please.
She actually did. Like here I am talking about same old taxonomy stuff. Like some of those slides are 20 years old. Like I had to like literally dust the cobweb off the side of the slide. And ontology, like Sara Mae showing up with all the new ontology stuff. So this was particularly cool. Like every time you talk, I learned something, and I really, really enjoyed this. A couple of the new slides that Sara Mae had were about the difference between taxonomy and ontology, and moreover, the difference between a taxonomist and an ontologist.
I love that. There's so many people that claim they're ontologists.
Yeah.
And
words, I know
aren't.
words.
Yeah, exactly.
I must be an ontologist.
Yeah.
Not so much.
You know, it's
So-
almost like when the information architects would say that we're taxonomists. And you were like, well, no, you're not. They're
Yeah.
two different disciplines. Then you have taxonomists now saying they're ontologists.
No, you're
No,
not.
you're not.
But Sara Mae, why don't you share why aren't they? Like, what is that difference? Because you were so clear and concise in how you did that on Friday.
Yeah, you know, there is definitely a difference there, and it's been a really great opportunity to sort of get to explore that and articulate that. And for me, I think it really comes down to the differences in the knowledge models themselves. So we talk a lot about, you know, sort of the shape of these knowledge models. So taxonomies really have that more hierarchical structure, those parent-child relationships, whereas ontologies are that web structure and can sort of go in different directions in terms of their relationships. And these different models enable different kinds of things. So our taxonomies are really great at navigation and tagging content. I think you were just talking about the importance of aboutness and topics, things like that. And then with our ontologies, we can do things like recommendation systems as we're implementing those in knowledge graphs. So it really comes down to those differences in terms of the models themselves and the skills required in order to build the models that look a little bit different from each other.
So what is that difference, right? So when I think about a taxonomy, it's very much about getting people to align on the vocabulary. So that's the top down. And then the bottom up is just being able to pluck out, to understand from a very rich corpus of content, what are the right words. But when we move to ontology, I feel like it's more than just understanding the words. It's about the context. It's about the relationship. And I don't mean parent-child. It's that web that you described. Like, how do you move from the expertise of vocabulary to context, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in our process, we often think about it in terms of, you know, what our use case is, and that often boils down even further to what sorts of questions are we trying to answer. And so the ontology model is built out in order to answer those questions. So we need to know the things that we're asking our questions about, which become our classes in our ontology, which could be fueled by a taxonomy, perhaps, if we need to control the terms that are used for that class of things. And then we start to think about the relationships between those things that could answer our questions.
So this, to me, is really striking, right? Because if we're in a taxonomy world, we're really saying, how do you describe this thing? What are the words that you would use to describe it? But what you just said is, from an ontological perspective, you're saying, what questions are we trying to answer? That's so much more complex. And there's such a predictive element to that. Like, how do you go about doing that? Like, I know if I put up a picture of a puppy on the screen, people are going to say, dog, doggo, beautiful little pet animal, golden retriever. But if you put up a puppy on the screen and you say, how would I train this animal? That's like, there's a million questions that you could ask. How would I train it? How do I feed it? How do I get one of these things? Like, that's so much harder.
Yeah, it is. it opens. So is your question around how do we get to sort of elicit that kind of information when we're building an ontology?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, what you described is, rather than just saying, what are the tags? How do I describe this thing? The question that you ask in the design process is, what are the questions that one would ask and what are the answers to that? And really, you're driving it by saying, what are the questions that one would want answered?
Mm-hmm.
That's such a bigger world. So
it is. And we could think about that in terms of, well, that could open the entire universe of everything to us, and where would we stop? Where would we begin? So one thing that is really important to the process for ontology design is that top-down aspect, which we do in taxonomy design as well. But when we're doing ontology design, we look really closely at what sorts of data exists already. And that gives us a sense of what an organization is capable of answering, given the data that they have. Or, sometimes we're also looking at creating data for the purpose of our use case, but that helps narrow down the universe quite a bit.
Interesting. So there's no sense in asking a question that can't be answered. But is there? Like, have you ever come across the situation where you've actually surfaced a question that the organization wished they could answer, but they can't yet? And Joe, maybe you want to chime in on this as well, like the situation where we've actually identified a gap in their knowledge that they want to be able to act upon.
Yeah. Oh, do you want to go first, Sara Mae, or should I?
Go ahead, Joe. I've been yammering on.
Who chose that option? Wow, thinking about this, it's definitely happened, right? And what it highlights frequently is gaps in their information assets, right? So, maybe there is oh, we're trying to capture information about X. Actually, I've got a great one for you.
Great.
We want to offer a question and answer system. And we want to use an ontology to understand the products and the services that we offer so that we can answer questions about those or specific topics. And then as you dig in, what you find out is the information isn't granular enough to allow for that, right? So if everything you have is a large document and someone says, hey Siri, what is this? The answer should not be a document, right? That you then get to go search. So the scenario I've seen isn't necessarily that there's a specific problem that they can't answer. It's that they don't have their content and information in a
granularity
format or granularity that allows for them to do things that are super cool and totally available to them with the graph.
So for those out there, this is the message, right? If you ever have a chatbot that gives you a document as a result, it's not really a chatbot. Sara Mae, anything to add?
I would just build off of what Joe was saying. Is often when we're building, another term we might hear is semantic networks. We're thinking about, especially in the case of a recommendation engine, for example, we're needing to match sort of our inputs to our outputs. And so we're adding metadata often that might not exist on one side or the other to help make that connection. So you can serve up a recommendation. So that's often taking the form of a metadata field powered by a taxonomy, perhaps.
And that's the key, right? Is that just because we're very much excited about ontologies and knowledge graphs, the taxonomy piece is still critical here.
Absolutely.
So much content. The least structured content is that which needs the taxonomy the most in order to play well with all the more advanced forms of knowledge.
Sara Mae, he's just saying that because he's a long time.
Oh, come on.
Ontologies are much more
gotta
important.
stay valid in this conversation.
That's great.
I think that takes us to the end of our speaker list. Adam, do you want to bring us home?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Sara Mae, and thanks, Joe and Zach, and of course everyone else who was joined us, who's been watching. Definitely, we're gonna be here all week, and by that I mean we're at KMWorld. So
Not here.
no, we'll be broadcasting from KMWorld all week. So definitely check out all our panelists. Check out all the great things. I'm particularly looking forward to these buzzwords, beyond buzzwords conversations. Because as someone who does agile coaching, I'm very familiar with buzzwords and how detrimental they can be. So it'll be great to hear about it in a KM perspective. But for everyone watching, thanks again, and we will chat with you later.
Thanks all. See ya.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.